This week, another product review video. This time, Battle Zoo Bestiary from Roll for Combat. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Knights of Last Call. We're here with Bob, Aaron, and of course, me, Derek. So this week we are going into a bestiary, but this one isn't from Paizo. This one is from Roll for Combat, which I think is a horrible name. I don't know why that's...
Yeah, who says that?
Yeah.
Right? All right, guys, roll for combat.
Roll for combat.
They do. Roll for initiative.
Roll for initiative.
Taken.
I guess I've never heard of it. No one ever says roll for combat.
Right.
That's not even a phrase.
Right.
Sorry, roll for combat.
It is now.
Yeah, well, I guess.
And that's why we give this book an F.
Oh, spoilers. No. All right. Well, Battle Zoo Bestiary, kind of a... Bob, what's the history of this product?
What do you mean? Like, why did they make it?
Where did it come from?
So, Paizo had a RPG Superstar type contest where people would submit monsters, and they eventually stopped that. And Roll for Combat decided that they wondered if they could kind of revitalize it, bring it back to center. And they asked Paizo, they worked with them. They said that, yeah, you can have permission to do that now. And so they started having this contest. I think this was the first one, because I think they're in year 2 right now of the same contest, where they just had people submit monsters, and then they would vote and rate these monsters. And maybe I'm getting it wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty much the premises of it. And then they would put it into this bestiary and release it. Then they did, obviously, the dragon thing, and then the island, Parrot Island thing afterwards, the Pirate Island. But yeah, it was just it's exactly what I want, a giant book of monsters.
Right. But
finally.
Yeah. But there's a couple caveats, right? So these are community submitted,
yes.
User submitted.
Yep, and they give you credit and
right. And I think there's a couple of these are variants, but I think there's just a little bit over 100 monsters. Does that sound about right? I think there's some variants.
Because some of them are like almost
some of them are in like a category.
Yeah, evolutions of themselves.
Yeah. So I don't know what the exact number is. I'm sure they say it's like 150. But.
Well, this book does a good job, though, at the end of giving a glossary and breaking down each one by all sorts of different things, which some other books that we've reviewed recently do not.
Yeah, so we can talk about that. But yeah, so there's a couple interesting things. One is these are user-submitted monsters. Number 2 is the folks who put the book together also sort of rate the monster, giving it either a copper award, silver, gold, platinum, and then there's sort of the grand prize winner.
Correct.
Yeah. And... yeah, I don't know. So initial thoughts.
Well, one, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the platinum were only awarded, I believe, to people that submitted more than one monster.
So I noticed that right away too.
Okay. I was like, all the platinum ones are 3 pages of monsters.
So that's something we can talk about. But any initial thoughts from you, Mr. Smith?
I really liked this book. I thought the presentation was good. I thought the art was phenomenal.
Yeah, I like the art too.
Art is amazing.
I took 2 looks at this book. I looked at it from the PF2 book as well as the 5th edition aspect of it.
So it got released for 5th edition as well.
It is 5th edition and PF2
compatible.
Now, Roll for Combat is a PF2 game channel, but they did this. Was this a Kickstarter?
This was.
Yeah, but they did a 5th edition book as well.
They released the PF2 version first, and they just released the 5e content.
And is it the same monsters in the 5e as the PF2?
Yes, they are the same monsters. And we'll get into it more in the review, but I was going through and comparing them at a point, and thematically and mechanically, I feel like they did a great job of representing that monster in both editions. My concern was PF2 is a mechanically complex game. 5th edition, typically not so much, but they used the design space well. So a monster thematically and mechanically interacts the same way in a 5th edition game as it would in a Pathfinder 2 game. I thought that was interesting.
That is good.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And something interesting to note. I don't know. I'm surprised to hear that. Because,
I was too, actually.
Because you would think that 5th edition, that Pathfinder 2 would have an advantage in sort of expressing a monster in a mechanically interesting way.
I think, particularly with our Pathfinder 2 players, Pathfinder 2 players are going to look at this and go, PF2 feels a little bit more elegant in how it was described.
Sure.
5th edition, based on my experience with it, we ran a campaign 1 through 20. I used primarily the earlier release of the monster manual and a little bit from a couple of the other ones, but I haven't used the newer book, right?
Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes.
Right, I haven't used that. So I'm assuming / hoping that the monster design got more elaborate as 5th edition continued on.
I think they started simplifying them now, didn't they?
No, I don't think so. Oh, well, they're saying they're going to be more streamlined.
Streamlined, yeah, yeah.
That's what they say. And I'm all for that, by the way.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll get back to that. But one of the things that I did appreciate about this book is that there are monsters in here who have spells.
Yes. Yes.
But it was like 3 or 4.
There was not a lot of spell. A lot of them just had a little bit.
Yeah, they would just have
They're
like,
not like spell
4 or 5
casting
spells
monsters.
that really just helped. Because if a monster has more than 5 spells, I promise you, they're just not going to cast them. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
No.
True.
And so and it just takes up a bunch of space. And I actually appreciate that they didn't, overcomplicate it, because every time you have to play a spellcaster monster in these games, that means flipping through a book and having to look something up. And that's very, very.
And Pathfinder, it might not even be the same book.
I want to stay on the page.
Yeah.
So I guess we could talk about specifics that sort of popped out or, kind of jumped out to you in terms of, maybe things that we thought were good or things that we thought were bad. I can start with one, which I thought was bad.
Go ahead.
Too many of these monsters had attack of opportunity. That is supposed to be a thing that is not a defining trait. And I've noticed this even in Paizo's monsters books, where in the later bestiaries, as well as in some of the APs, they realize that when a monster is supposed to be interactive and fun, especially if you're using it as sort of a boss type monster, that, well, it needs a reaction. And the default reaction for most of these monsters is attack of opportunity, especially if you want it to be some sort of offensive capability. That was not the tagline of this edition. The whole concept was very few monsters have attack of opportunity. We want combat to be dynamic. We don't want you to get punished for trying to move around the battlefield. That was the old way. This is the new way.
Feels like they're walking that back a bit.
Did they all have attack of opportunity, or did you just talk about reactions?
No.
Almost all of them have reactions.
A lot of them have a reaction.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
Reactions are interesting. They keep the fight dynamic. That being said, well, okay, this is a whole separate rant.
We'll do that differently.
Well, no, but it's just like, okay, the premise of Pathfinder 2 is this monster is level 8. That means nothing, because this monster could be a boss fight. If you're a bunch of level 5 PCs and you're fighting one of this level 8 monster, it's a severe fight. Yeah, I want it to have a reaction because I want that monster to go, and then in the middle of the PC's turn, I want it to do its awesome thing.
Right.
But I could also be using 4 of these or 6 of these versus a level 12 or 14 party. Now, I don't want to track 6 reactions from 6 essentially minion lackey monsters. There's a lack of elegance there.
Well, that's just an intrinsic Pathfinder 2.
Yeah, it's a problem with Pathfinder 2. I agree with that. So I thought there were a lot of things with attack of opportunity.
A lot of them are constructs and fae.
I put too many. I wrote this down. Too many constructs and fae.
If I'm on the same page as you, I feel like I did something right.
Yeah. Now, there were a lot of constructs and fae in this book. A lot. I mean, like a lot. Like to the point where I guess more than one of us noticed it.
Yeah, I don't usually notice that kind of stuff.
I literally wrote down constructs and fae, too many.
Almost everyone was like, oh, what's this thing? Oh, it's a construct. Oh, and then this one also has a fae. I'm like, is that everyone?
Yeah,
every one of them?
And a lot of the constructs were either sort of like pseudo-robot people.
Which I don't usually run.
Or they were like big, hulking, like thresher machines.
Yep.
Right.
There was a lot of constructs and fae.
I also wasn't a huge fan of some of the fae. There was the one that wants to be a heroic knight, but sucks, but doesn't know it sucks.
And it's like steals bravery from other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, well, this is a little weird, which I guess fae are weird, but
Yeah.
wasn't my favorite.
Yeah. So, again, it may sound like we're
I know. I actually love this book.
We're trying to get to all the negatives.
Yeah, we're nitpicking on certain things. But I mean, I will say there was just a lot of constructs and fae.
There was.
And probably like maybe third would be like undead.
But that to me, I run that kind of stuff. I'm not running constructs.
I do feel like this is a bias, right? Because like you give me a book of giants and undead, I'm like, this is the best book ever. But like, there's probably people out there who love fae and constructs.
Okay, that's fair. Maybe they do. I like the undead.
You may like that.
Yeah. I thought the undead stuff was cool.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed there were a lot of creatures with auras.
Which I think is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think this is all probably part of an effort to make the creatures more dynamic, make them more interactive. And auras are just sort of a great way to do that. There were a lot of conditions in this book that got overused. Again, I'm nitpicking. I'm breaking this really down. There were a lot of auras, gazes, and abilities that dazzled, there were a lot of auras, gazes, and abilities that stupefied.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those were like, in my opinion, a somewhat number of sickens, but those 3 conditions got used a ton.
What about the ability, the swallow whole? Now that's a new one, I think.
No,
for
Swallow Hole's
so
been around forever.
That was in a ton of monsters. I was like,
Yeah.
man, everyone can swallow whole.
Yeah.
Almost all the constructs, not all, but a lot of things could swallow whole. And I was like, I've never even saw that yet come up in a single fight I've ever been in.
Yeah. But there are some other things I really did like. I really appreciated, if you look at the index, almost 90% of the monsters in this book are level 10 or lower.
Yep.
Yes, I was gonna say, like, these are actually
That
things
means
I
they're
could
useful.
fight.
Yeah, it means
Exactly.
they're useful. Look, the fact of the matter is, most people don't get above level 10. And if this book was, and it's a good chunk too. It's like they gave you like 5 level 1 monsters, 6 level 2, 6 level 3, 6 level 4, 7 level, and then it gets to like level 10, and then there's like 1 12, a couple 13, 14s, a couple 15. There's like 1 level 23 monster in the book.
Yeah, there's a couple 18s and stuff, that random
but
stuff in there.
The fact of the matter is, most campaigns aren't going to get to those high levels.
Right.
And a lot of times at that point in your campaign, you might be making custom monsters anyways, or custom villains. I appreciate the fact that we talk about this all the time. Yeah. I think Bestiary should focus on the lower levels. Yeah. And this definitely did that.
And to be clear, we're not saying there's no higher level monsters, but the bulk of this is 1 through 10,
which it should be.
The bulk of this book is going to be valuable to most people running campaigns.
Yeah.
And I like this format better than I did the Monster Myth, where it gives me a little bit of a snippet, a good chunk of background, and then the stat block, and then some good art.
Yeah.
So that to me is what I wanted.
This is the book of Bob.
Yeah. If this was what Monster Myth was, but give me like mythical monsters, that's what I was wanting.
Yeah.
Again, I get it, people. I did not know it was. I didn't read that it was Lost Omens. I did interpret that wrong. But this is kind of my style book, and that's the kind of book that I'm all about.
So you mentioned before, and this is something I really like about the book as well. You mentioned that a lot of the ones that got the Platinum Award,
yes,
were constructed. And if you're familiar with 4th edition D&D, or if you're familiar with Monster Manual 4 and Monster Manual 5 from 3rd edition, 3.5 actually, edition D&D, they did this really great thing, and I really love this in Monster Manuals or in Bestiaries, where the Platinum monsters, they would give you like a type of monster. Okay, so like a great example of one where there's a couple of creatures that are these like salt creatures.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and what they do is they give you 4 or 5 monsters that are all sort of these salt creatures. There's like a salt hound, and then there's like a salt big hulking brute, and then there's like a flying salt creature.
Yep.
It's almost like the arachnids from Starship Troopers, right? Like there's the big one, and then there's the quick little one, and then there's a flyer one, and they're all different levels. They do different things. One of them is definitely clearly like a big melee brute. Another one's kind of more of a ranged attacker. Another one's like a quick flying skirmishing attacker. So they do different roles in combat.
And those salt ones, all under 10, level 10.
And they're different levels, but they're close.
Yeah.
You can it's not like one is level 15 and one is level 2. Right.
When you're talking about is 4, 6, 8, and 10.
4, 6, 8, and 10. Perfect. Right. Perfect. If you're running like a level 7, 8 game, you could run in a bunch of the level 4s as sort of like this horde of the salt. What are they? The salt seekers? The salt
stalkers, salt seekers,
salt mother.
Wow, all the S's.
Sorcher and the mother.
Yeah, and then the big salt, and then it's like perfect boss. That when you have entries like that, that's an entire adventure in a can.
Yeah. Well, then
it's
wonder. It's
incredible. And they did that for the salt monsters.
Yeah,
they did that for the husks.
Yeah.
The husks, yeah.
Which I also liked. The sort of fallen leshies and plant creatures. The husk monster, very cool.
They heard it here. He liked a leshy.
I liked when they were dead and dried out. They did it for the shale monsters.
Yes.
And I think that is awesome.
Yeah.
I love having like, here is the ogre section. Here are 5 ogres that are different. They're not all just, I hit you with my ogre hook. And that's the way these monsters are in a lot of the Paizo bestiaries. So I really like that these monsters did different things. And the salt creatures, when I read them, I was like, okay, wow, this is like, it felt very 4th edition-ish to me.
Did. Yeah.
I was like, oh, here's the artillery monster.
Yep.
Here's the defender monster. Here's the brute monster. Here's the skirmisher monster. It felt very, very
now
4th
they
edition.
Do that because of the hunting aspect where you're going to maybe go at their nest, go at their hive.
No.
You know what I mean? Okay, they
well,
the shale one for sure is meant to be hunted because it's got the gems in it and it's
not about hunting. I mean,
oh, that's what it is in this book.
If you read the GMG, the archetype system that Derek and I really enjoyed from 4th edition for monsters, right? So your soldiers, your defenders.
Soldiers, controllers.
Oh, so that's more about what they were trying to do.
Well, that
with
system actually exists in Pathfinder too. It's in the GMG. It's a subsection, but they talked about like, hey, when you're building your monster, if your monster is a brute-like creature, you should modify the statistics like this. If it's more of a defender or a controller, you should modify.
But this one just gave you actual different.
Well, this is showing the practical application of that.
That's
now I
correct.
understand. Now I understand.
Well, and I want to make an important caveat to that, which I think this book did very well. And I think the Paizo Bestiary,
Bestiary.
1, 2, 3 did not do well.
Paizo.
That those different monster types in the GMG, the magical striker, the brute, the spellcaster, the soldier, that modifies the stats.
That's it.
So a brute is going to have really high damage and a moderate attack roll. High hit points, low armor class. Soldier, high armor class, not as good hit points, right? That's fine from a statistics, but statistics are boring.
That's half of the
Has no
equation.
flavor.
I don't even know if that's half the equation. It might be 30% of the equation. The other 70% of that is, in my opinion, what are the monster's abilities?
Right.
What do they do what is their job in a fight? And as a game master, when you can go into a encounter and you have some idea of what this monster's job or role is in that combat, I think it makes it just that much easier to roll.
Yeah.
Oh, this monster wants to stay far away and shoot globs of acid at it.
Right.
And here are a bunch of abilities and reactions that all help it reinforce that role and help it, do that role. And then when it does certain things, players are going to go, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. I was going to say, you were talking about from the GM side, from the player side, that's huge.
Right.
Because now I go, oh, these people live together. Like these salt creatures. I understand their sort of community. That guy's this part of that community and he's doing that.
Right.
And it thematically and systematically feels right.
Right.
And so it just makes sense then. Oh, is that the same creature, just a different version of that creature? That seems kind of boring.
It turns the combat into kind of like a puzzle.
Puzzle.
Because you have to dismantle it, right? Okay, I don't want to base up with the guys that are big in defending. I want to get around them and get to the artillery and take them out.
If you're not interested in that sort of more tactical miniature combat, I agree that's probably unnecessary. But a lot of Pathfinder 2 is that.
Right.
And you're probably playing with miniatures or, tokens probably on a battle grid, and you're trying to do that. So it's like, well, that's kind of the way the game works.
Now, can I tell you what they did wrong in the Platinum?
Yeah.
Okay. They didn't wrap up the single stats of a creature on one page. So because
did they split the entry.
So because these monsters they span like 4 pages.
This is Bob the editor.
Oh yeah. This Salt Stalker, his last ability goes onto the next page.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, that's kind of annoying.
That is bad. That is a reasonable thing.
It happens later.
I'm gonna hard agree with that, right?
That happens later in the tables. There's some tables that go onto the second page, and I'm like, why can you not make this table fit in one page?
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stalker.
Like you would think it just ends right there.
Yeah, so
That's on another page.
normally I'm like, Bob, you're nitpicking. But no, I gotta say, as a GM, this would drive me insane at the table. If I'm playing, I want to read it and flip into 2 pages, and I don't know exactly how this is going to be in the physical copy, and I play with physical copies. If I have to flip the page, that's just unworkable.
Right.
And it sounds trite, but if I had to look at another page,
It's just one other thing that you have to do.
one other thing. Yeah. So Bob, I completely agree that.
I mean, it was me nitpicking, but I did notice it.
So
The good news is that's an editing thing. So, you guys could fix this.
Yep.
So let's kind of move into the back half here of this review before we get to our sort of final takes on it. Let's talk about, are there any specific monsters, maybe 1 or 2 that really stood out to you, either as being awesome or maybe bad, and why?
Well, I like a lot of these monsters have a secondary sort of thing that happens when they die. A couple monsters had that, which I thought was pretty cool. Like once it dies, you have to fight the other thing or something, part of it. I think that was pretty cool. But I actually I kind of like this. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Is Gwinophobia on page 40, which is 40 or 39 in the book. He just looks like something that'd be wicked to fight. He's this undead husk of a corpse with these tentacle things that are using it as a meat shield, and patching together pieces. I'm like, that would be the craziest thing in a dungeon. Totally, you have these undead and it's piecing it together, and it's a level 9 thing. This could be a pretty sizable thing at the end of that encounter. I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, there's just things like that, and it was very fearful looking. It if I'm thinking about fearing in a dungeon, this image, I was like, that is that. And I think that's a good thing that the art really brought home too. But this is just one of the ones I kind of liked.
You know, kind of hitting that thread for a bit, I felt there was a good amount of horror in this book, right? They did a great job with the narrative explaining, why has this monster come to be? And a lot of them come from very horrible things, right? Oh, well, when a person dies like this thing is created, right? And like when you really embrace that, and it's something I feel like it's easy to forget about, D&D or Pathfinder, but there is a huge horror aspect to this game.
Yeah,
and these things can be terrifying.
I don't even know if horror is the right word for it, but one thing that I did want to say, and I guess I'll say it now, I felt like, I'll talk about my final rankings on how monsters ranked up. A lot of times when I read Bestiary, it's like, I can't use this monster. It's not a monster.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't necessarily have to be horrible, but it needs to be a monster.
Right.
Something, a foe, a villain, a monstrous creature that is going to be an effective threat
Not
to
the
character.
pirate parrot.
Not the pirate parrot. That one's not great. But
Or
like
the beaver.
a lot of
Beaver.
Not the Reaver Beaver.
The Reaver beaver.
Which I get, they put some of these things in there because they're fun and cutesy and people like that, whatever. I think it's wasted space. But most of these monsters I read and said, this is a monster. It fills a certain niche. And if I needed a monster to fill that niche, I would be happy. I would be proud to run this monster and put it on my table. And that means that the bestiary has a lot of high usability between the lower levels, the monsters that kind of do what they say on the tin, get the job done, and bring to the table some interesting abilities. And from that perspective, I win all around.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
These are foes. These are monsters.
Yeah.
There's a few like you said.
There's a few that are kind of weird.
So were there any that particularly stood out to you or anything interesting that you want to kind of highlight here?
So I know this isn't one of your favorites, but I really did enjoy it.
There was you being dramatic again.
Sorry. I'm very dramatic apparently. I like the skeletal monstrosity.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
It felt like a cool big boss fight. I like how it works. I like how they play with the defenses a little bit. One of the things I like in general about this book is these monster blocks are big. They're big. And why are they big? As we were talking about before, there's a lot of buttons to push. There's a lot of abilities. The DM gets to play with some things and have fun with it. And the players get to experience that, which maybe that's a different kind of fun. Maybe they're not necessarily looking forward to, getting splinter bursted from the monstrosity. But it's fun, right? We're playing this game to fight cool things and have cool things happen. But, this creature specifically is just cool. He's big. He does a lot of damage. He's got cool attacks. He's got a heal when you're eating and draining your bone marrow out.
Yeah.
He terrifies 500 feet around him, just terror. He explodes when you kill him.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. When he dies, something crazy still happens.
Now, Derek doesn't like that because it's a gotcha, and that's a fair point. But
I think it's great.
I like this creature. I like a lot of them. I like the I forget the exact name of it, but it's basically the mimic building.
The Butcher House?
The Butcher House.
That's the
so
beginning.
cool.
That was one of my favorite monsters
That got
in
a
the
gold
book.
rating too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite monsters in the book.
I like a lot of the themes with this. And I didn't expect that, right? I did.
I think they did a good job of using the Pathfinder 2 mechanics, using activities and actions to make the creature express itself in a unique way.
Right.
Than other than just being a collection of slams and strikes.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately a lot of monsters in the book, in the core bestiaries just kind of end up being a collection of, they either end up being a collection of slams and strikes or a bunch of spells.
And I want to touch on that briefly for the 5e portion.
Yeah, so why don't you talk about the 5e?
Yeah, so we mentioned before playing the campaign and playing it, and the monsters, and you've played this. You were not in the campaign, but I feel like a lot of the monsters in the original Monster Manual were very samey.
For 5th edition.
Fifth edition. Very few had a particularly lower level in this range, right? 1 through 10 had real differences in stats, right? I remember we were playing a level with the Lizardmen and the Gnolls, and they were almost identical. I mean, the blocks were almost identical. It was kind of just very dull, right? And so when I look at this, I go, okay, I could see Paizo releasing monsters that might do some of the things like this. These are still very cool, but I can see creatures like this already existing. But if I'm a 5th edition dungeon master and I want to have more crunch in my game, I want to have cooler monsters, I'm not happy with the releases we have, or I just want more because listen, this is a 10-year-old game at this point. It came out 2011.
Yeah, like 2013.
13. Okay, there's not that many monster books. Like, this is an exciting release because 1, I'm going to get 100 plus more monsters, but 2, these things are cool. And like I said, they did a good job of translating the mechanics over. And the monsters do pretty much the same thing.
Even though it's 5th edition.
Even though it's 5th edition.
Okay.
And they made it work in a 5th edition way, right? We're making fun of the Reaver Beaver, right? The Reaver Beaver hates lumberjacks, and in Pathfinder, if you have a lumberjack background or you're holding an axe, the Reaver Beaver is going to get a bonus to attack you and a little bit of extra damage, right? And in 5th edition, they get advantage against lumberjacks. So, but terrible creature, but funny comparison. But there's a lot of that going on here, right?
So the 5th edition
names are
I think the key thing to take away is we're saying these monsters are cool. They made a 5th edition version of this.
Yes.
And most of, if not all of the coolness was preserved.
Yeah, they did a good job.
And there's still that mechanical complexity even in the 5th edition.
Right. And if this is like cool for Pathfinder Dungeon Masters, I think this is great.
Now, did they do that?
That's interesting.
I didn't read the 5th edition book. Did they do that by just relying on like legendary actions and resistances?
They used a lot of it. Yeah. Reactions, legendary. It's all done in a very 5th edition way.
Gotcha.
We could put a clip or something up here, but like, multiple actions, reactions, legendary layer actions. They translate in a way that was appropriate. Some of them, the passive section, just natural abilities.
Yeah,
cool.
Because that's a thing in 5th edition where they can just do a thing.
I mean, then this should excite 5e players, then maybe even more so than PF2 players.
Well, that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
Is like I think Pathfinder Dungeon Masters, like these are cool. I like,
and
these.
I think they're cool. Yeah,
But there's lots of like mechanically rich monsters already available. We have 3 bestiaries at this point.
correct.
and the monsters of myth.
And Monsters of Myth, which if you haven't seen, check out our review. But at least from my experience as a 5th edition Dungeon Master, this book was rich and great because I'm like, whoa, I got a lot more things to play with now. A lot more surprises for my players. So again, I own the 5th edition version of this. After doing this review, I went out and immediately purchased my own hard copy of Pathfinder 2 because I like this book that much.
Okay.
But as excited as I am, like to throw these guys at you guys in our Pathfinder game, I'm like, if I was a 5th edition DM, I would be ecstatic because this is like
That's awesome.
a
Very
whole
cool
new
stuff.
opportunity for me to go and do stuff, except for the Reaver Beaver.
So the monster that I wanted to kind of particularly call out, and by the way, if you've been watching along this while, we're going to get to our final reviews here in a second. But I would be remiss to say that with these product reviews, we also always try to talk a little bit further in detail, and we make that available to people who are members of our Patreon. So if you're interested in joining our Patreon and seeing some extra content as we kind of go maybe a little bit deeper into some additional monsters, as well as maybe talk about some of the game design element choices that they made in this book and how we feel about those.
Mostly it's just us ranting.
Mostly just us ranting. But if you like what we have to say and you want to join our conversation, take a look and below. We also have an incredible Discord that's attached to our Patreon, and the conversation there goes 24/7. It's incredible. And I highly recommend it. But what I wanted to draw attention to was it's like the Werven, but it's the Irven.
Oh, yeah, I saw that guy.
It has built into it a reaction chart. It's basically a monster that can't make up its mind or something like that. It's a flying Wyvern type monster. But when you encounter it, you roll a d4 and it might start the fight off as being hostile. It could be unfriendly.
Yeah.
It could be friendly.
That.
And I'm just thinking, I was just laughing because I was like, it's funny to me that is now a unique game mechanic, right? Because anybody who's been playing the game for 30 years knows that reaction charts were always a thing that happened. Anytime you encountered any monster, you would roll to see what its reaction was. And the idea that in a modern game sense, we don't do that anymore. But
now it's a mechanic.
But now that it's a mechanic on this monster, I think that for a lot of Pathfinder 2 GMs, that would be an interesting experience because this monster swoops down and you, the DM, right? You don't know how the monster is going to react. The mechanics of this monster say, nope, you got to roll. And then suddenly the monster's friendly and wants to ally with them. And you're like, I have to play this out completely differently. It's creating the kind of game experiences that I really like, which are sort of emergent, unexpected, undirected gameplay that kind of force you to think on your toes a little bit. And I just thought that was a cool thing to throw in as a monster ability. I thought that was really cool. So before we get to our final rankings, the big question, the most important question that we could possibly do with this video.
Okay.
And that is, and let me see if I can get this right here. Yeah. We'll go around. Bob, are you team Not Man or team Rope Golem?
Oh, Not Man. Not Man, 100%. Not Man's sweet.
All right, so you're Team Knotman. Is it Knotman? Knotsman.
Knotsman.
Yeah, Team Knotsman,
Knotsman.
Team Rope Golem. Aaron,
I'm gonna have to go with the Knotsman.
you're Team Knotsman?
Knotsman.
He even looks sweet.
It's a perfect sweep. I am Team Knotsman as well. So if you're looking for a bundle of rope construct, look no further. This book has 2. It's got you covered, but you can throw that rope golem away. Sorry, rope golem, whoever created it. Well, the Knotsman got you beat.
Now, what's
That's
great
actually pretty cool.
is they are almost the same level, so you could throw both of them at your party. That's a lot of rope.
Right. And you'd have one pile of rope and you'd be like, haha, that one's immune to magic. Why? It's golem. That one, it's totally fine. You can attack.
Right.
What are the odds?
This one's vulnerable to water.
What are the odds that two rope monsters made it into one book? And of course, as we said before, both constructs.
Apparently, there's a necessity and need in the bestiary.
Clearly missing the rope monster
Multiple
genre.
people sat down, were like, I want to win this contest.
Right. Well, these are the ones that they put in
Ropes.
the book.
Yes.
That means there might have been 5 monsters submitted that were made of rope. All right. Well,
If they had all submitted them, that would have been a platinum rope creature.
so we obviously are excited about this book. I think it's overall to say that. But the one thing I did want to say is, and I'll put this stat here on the screen. The book, as I said, gives them each monster that's been submitted an award.
Yep.
Yes.
Copper, silver, gold, platinum, and a grand prize winner. I wanted to see how that tracked with my thoughts. So as I was going through the book and read the monster entries, I said that was this monster terrible? Was this monster bad? Was this monster Was this monster okay? Or was this monster cool? And I graded the monsters. And I'll put the stat up on screen, but what you can see here is, the copper monsters, I only thought a couple of them were cool. Silver, more percentage. Gold, very high. Platinum, super high.
Yeah.
And I thought the grand prize winner was very cool. So that tracks very, very highly with me. And at the end of the day, with my scoring system, close to 50% of these monsters I thought were cool or even good.
Yeah.
So for me, from a bestiary,
And you hate these books.
and I hate bestiary. Like I'm saying that 50, I mean, I think a lot of these monsters I only thought 9% of the monsters were terrible, right? And just basically unusable or stupid.
If you know Derek.
That is a very high ranking for me.
Yeah.
I usually feel that about half of the monsters in a bestiary are unplayable and unusable. Literally.
Yeah.
And I think that number in this book is actually 10%.
That's a huge.
That is a huge margin.
Yeah.
That is a huge
Roll for
margin.
Combat, maybe not the best name, but phenomenal book. Excellent job.
Yeah, excellent job. So
now they have what's his face working with him, Mark.
Mark? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So
This should be really good.
I am going to give the book a solid A. I thought it was really good. I thought for a Kickstarter book, they did a good job with the graphic design and the art interest and all that other stuff. And yeah.
I give it 5 eggplant emojis. A+.
Okay.
Easy A. 5th edition, A+.
Yeah.
Wow.
The 5th edition A+.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
I mean, because that's the oasis in the desert, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it was a phenomenal book. Now, you didn't like the hunting part, did you?
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in our Patreon
Okay.
bonus video. So
I like that part.
So if you're interested in hearing us talk a little bit more about the book, and you want to hear us talk about the sort of second half of the book, which is sort of a monster hunting video, why don't you maybe take a look and at our Patreon and see if that's something you might be interested in, and take a look at that.
But if you're buying this book because you just love bestiaries, it's phenomenal.
Regardless of how you feel about the monster hunting, don't buy the book for the monster hunting or because of the monster hunting. Let's just judge the book on what it is, right?
Yes,
Which
it's
is
a bestiary.
It's a bestiary, and I think it's a very good one.
These guys did a phenomenal job. It's a great book. It is high quality. The art is wonderful.
Yeah.
The ideas were imaginative, narrative, and that is reflected in mechanics. If you want to buy a book, these guys are definitely worthy of your support.
Yeah, and
phenomenal book.
Yeah, and what does that say, by the way, that a book of random monsters accumulated from the internet basically is better than the books that are being made by the professional designers?
Sounds like we should make more books like these.
Yeah, we should maybe make more books like these. They thought they were really good. All right. Well, on behalf of Aaron and Bob, I am Derek Melinda from the Knights of Last Call saying thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call.